Alright, scuffed build guide for... It's not really a guide. I mean, there's a lot of other people who do better guides than me. I'm too lazy to do any overlays or anything like that, but this is pretty much what the sort of end game General's Cry look like. Obviously, it's not even leveled up, but basically, this is how I play it. Um, this is a legacy. I know it's a standard right now, but so this is legacy. There is some issues with the mana cost thing. I don't know exactly what this costs. It costs 3 mana, but you also need some mana reduction for this. So, but that's like the biggest issue with this, honestly. That's the biggest issue, um, is the mana thing here. Now, I played before with Corpse Walker. It's a unique boot, um, and I could actually play without cycloning. It was possible to do that, but it was not as like when you're cycloning with obviously with Desecrate, you are constantly making bodies and corpses, which makes you guaranteed to hit Yanor's Cry. But the Corpse Walker, I wouldn't say it's not 100%, but a lot of times it felt like there was not enough bodies sometimes. But Corpse Walker is an option if you don't want to use Cyclone and you just want to walk around. It is totally an option. So Corpse Walker is actually pretty decent. Um, Number one item is obviously Red Blood Banner. You can't play without this shield. I have a feeling that this item might be pretty expensive. I would say the first week of the league, I would probably say this is going to cost more than an X. Then it might drop. I can't remember the price last league, but it's going to be pretty expensive. Um, then we need a Paradoxica, but you know, just play like normal slam build, like an Earthquake or some shit. Do some white maps, get some currency. Then you have a Red Blood Banner. Then you buy Ichimonji, which is a rare, unique sword, and then you play with that unique sword until you can buy a Paradoxica. Preferably a Paradoxica that gives you dexterity. The build is dexterity starved because it's a fucking pain to get dexterity. We don't have many jewel slots because we have to get a fluid motion. You just have to. Um, it's a lot of people say this is a league starter. I'm not too sure. I
Cannot
would
do
not
this yet.
recommend playing this as a league starter if you're not experienced because you're gonna be stuck playing a shitty melee build, and melee is absolutely the worst I played it since beta, and melee is probably at its worst stage as it ever have been. Um, so if you unless you know what you're doing, I would not really recommend playing this build because there is some uniques that you absolutely need to order to do damage or even to play the build. Um, but it is very, very, very strong. It's probably the best, in air quotes here now. It's the best melee build in the game in terms of raw damage. Um, I have not the highest scaling right now. I'm using this chest piece. It's not a super good chest piece. The helmet is obviously best in slot, and also the enchant is the best in slot. Highly recommend getting Cooling Strike on a pair of gloves. You don't need the elevated thingy. It's not super necessary, but the Cooling Strike is absolutely sick on this build, as it is with any really melee build or build in general. You want Cooling Strike. Um, I'm not using a rare amulet. Most people use a rare amulet when it comes to when it comes to this build. You can use any amulet really, but I really, really felt uh, I leveled this character in, I would say, 2 days to level 91. I was dying to ignite, and like I got shocked, and because you're using abysses and you generally don't have that much defenses. Getting ignited, it just felt like fucking ass shit, man. And I highly recommend getting this because you're getting that purative element, which is hands down the absolute best defensive for melee right now because there's so much elemental shit going on the ground, and it's just I personally feel like you absolutely need it. But you can have ashes of the star is good, or a rare amulet. You don't need purative element. The gem setup right now that I have determination, which I won't say it's well, it's sort of recommended. I'm only at 78% right now, but since you'll be using abysses, having a determination is pretty sick. We have a lot of sand, and then we have a divergent pride. I have enlighten 4, which is enlighten is super expensive. I know. Um, you know, you don't have to play with that, um, of course. And then we have pure elements here linked with precision, and we have a berserk here too. The playstyle is basically you hold. I mean, some people have it differently. I like to have it on my mouse click, so I constantly when I'm sort of cycloning, I'm constantly summoning the minion. Berserk is here. We put Berserk. Berserk is pretty much spammed as soon as we can. As soon as it's up again, we spam Berserk. It's like half our damage is Berserk. Yeah, so vulnerability ring, of course, because now Assassin's Ring is Legacy. I would actually say that Assassin's Ring is better on General's Cry. Some people even have self-casting Assassin's Mark because it's really strong. Um, but vulnerability is pretty good still. Um, yeah, and then Richlota's Coil, of course. The again best in slot could be expensive, depends on the market. Sometimes it is really expensive. It haven't been that expensive though lately, and I think it's because melee builds have been terrible. So but yeah, I said before, it right now it's hard to say, but it might be 20x in this build, right? So you can go way further if you have the money for it. You can get a better chess piece. Um, but it is really hard. I feel like personally you hit a plateau with General's Cry because you have mandatory uniques you absolutely have to have, and the damage is just doing what it's doing. The thing with General's Cry is that you reach really fast, super high damage, but getting further from that requires pretty big investments. So go for this as a league starter, absolutely, but just be prepared for it being pretty difficult to get to a certain point. I'm using Unwavering Stance, and obviously we use Call to Arms. Uh, them, yeah. I mean, it's a very standard tree. There's nothing really to go over. I only have this because we get Intimidating and Onslaught from this. Pretty. I would say this is a lead. At least lead by example is like mandatory because it's insane how good that is. Intimidated, we have right now. I have Awakened Melee Fist, which gives me Intimidated, but it's still good. And obviously, it's just, if you don't have Awakened Melee Fist, you know, we have Pride. This is the sort of late game stuff when you really want to min max. You get a Pride Impale, and then I mean this dropped for me, but the armor one is really sick when you have Determination. Um, yeah, it's not really that much to go over here. I would say that the build is still close to tier 1. It's really good, and if you are a sort of experienced player and you know what you're doing, I highly recommend getting this as a league starter because it is really fun when it gets going, and it's a lot of damage. So yeah, fun build.